holding up my copy of the Infinity Machine. Sebastian, I must be honest,
Right.
I am only 260 pages in.
It's a
I've been
good down
trying to get
payment.
through it. Yeah, and I've been enjoying it thoroughly, but as you saw on X, I only realized over the weekend that I'm actually a big fan of yours with my 2 copies here of The Power Law and also More Money Than God. So thank you for joining us. We're really looking forward to the conversation today.
Sure, great.
Let's dig into it. My first question for you, Sebastian, is, and it's a bit of a broad one, but after 4 years of being around Demis, what type of a man is Demis Hassabis?
So I'm shocking some of my readers by pronouncing a technology leader to be a good guy. This meets with incredulity in some quarters. But I did kick the tires on this. I spent more than 30 hours talking to Demis, and I also spoke to 100 people around him. And I also ran into random kind of people who, had no reason. Demis had no reason to think that they would talk to me, but they kind of had kids in the same school and stuff like that. So I do feel I know Demis very closely and deeply. And, he's got a lot of ego. He's sort of messianic. He wants to be the person who brings artificial intelligence to humanity. But he's basically got very good values. He stayed in Britain because he thinks that there's too much inequality and general fake it till you make it in America. He, unlike some tech titans we could mention, where you can't count the number of children they have, he got married to his college sweetheart, and they have 2 kids, and they're still married. I mean, he's a very relatable, normal guy with good values in this extraordinary, powerful position of, shepherding AI into the world.
Yeah. You see those elements of his character shine through, especially in the earlier days, which you cover in the book. There was a specific book of his, the Gödel Escher book that's referenced in your book multiple times as like a form of inspiration for Demis and a number of other things. But I wanted to ask, why do you think he drew so much inspiration from that book in particular?
I mean, the central idea, which I think he latched onto in Gödel Escher Bach, is that in some sense, the human brain is like a computer. There are, synapses that send signals, and you either have a positive signal or a negative signal, like a 1 or a 0 in computer code. And so, what the human brain is capable of doing, in theory, and Demis thought this back in the 90s, 15 years before AI could do anything, pretty much. He believed that what the human brain could do, a computer could do. And that was what gave him the confidence and the faith to say that he was going to be devoting his career to building AI, super, super early, right? I mean, he was thinking this in the mid-90s. He founded DeepMind in 2010. Sam Altman and Elon Musk don't do OpenAI until 2015. So, Demis really was the first person on this.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I guess we've spoken about OpenAI today on the show. We can get into that a little bit later. There was a piece that went out yesterday by the New Yorker that I'd love to get your opinion on. But specifically around the narrative around the founding of OpenAI. Yes, it came later on. But what was really interesting to me to see that really came to light in the book was the narrative that OpenAI used to sort of as a marketing funnel, really, for talent, for support, in the sense where DeepMind was almost framed as a evil entity. It was big tech. It was owned by Google. There was, after the whole partnership with the NHS kind of fell through with Suleiman, there was some negative connotations attached to how that played out. But OpenAI was open. It was safe. It was, a multitude of these sort of looked up to figures were kind of controlling this openly. But sort of paradoxically now, when we sort of look at what's happening against both entities now, it's quite shocking to me to see DeepMind looked down upon as evil and OpenAI looked on as safe. Can you maybe just talk to us a little bit about that time with Demis when this narrative was getting pushed and what your take is, I guess, looking at it now currently?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're exactly right. It is ironic, given what we're reading in the New Yorker now. And also just the general narrative about Sam Altman that's been around for a few years. If you were going to Silicon Valley regularly, you heard all this stuff, that he's totally untrustworthy, he lies. He's probably a sociopath. I mean, these kinds of things were floating around anyway. And Demis is really none of those things. And so it's ironic that the OpenAI camp set themselves up as being more virtuous than DeepMind, just as you say, back when they founded in 2015. I mean, the background there was that when Demis Hassabis sold DeepMind to Google in 2014, he cared sincerely about safety. And so he made it a condition that if Google was going to buy the company, he would have to promise to have a safety and ethics oversight board, making sure that AI would be deployed in a responsible fashion. It wouldn't just be up to the corporate board of Google. And in fact, Demis believed in this so sincerely that Facebook offered him more money to sell to Facebook, and he turned them down because they were not serious about safety. He also, by the way, turned Elon Musk down. Musk wanted to buy him, and he refused to sell DeepMind to Musk, and that really made Musk very angry. And so what happened after the Google acquisition was that, to make good on this plan to have a safety and ethics oversight board, they got together a bunch of influential people. And in fact, they got Elon Musk into this. And he hosted the first safety and ethics oversight meeting. It's all secret, but it's all in my book. And Musk used that meeting essentially to listen to the plans of DeepMind and then launch OpenAI as a competitor together with Sam Altman. So he basically, said he was an honorable advisor to DeepMind, then double-crossed them and did his own thing, which again makes it ironic that he was positioning OpenAI as being more virtuous. But really, I think what we see in all this is that, when you're confronted with a technology as powerful and as exciting as AI, every single major ego in tech is going to want to be part of it. And, Sam Altman and Elon were among those. And so they set up OpenAI because they were just jealous of Demis Hassabis and his leadership.
I wanted to I want to go a little bit deeper on that and get your perspective on where do you see kind of the safety of AI now, and is kind of AI in safe hands generally, do you feel? I just want to understand your kind of broad perspective on that, given what what we were just talking about.
Sure. Look, I think there are two classes of things which go wrong in the world, right? One is where you have a bad individual who's either stupid or unethical. Sure. And makes a bad decision. And you can say, hey, if we switched out this person and put in a different person, the world would have been better. Yeah. But then you've got other kinds of problem, which are not about bad individuals. It's just about bad dynamics, which are bigger than the individual. And I think the point is that, someone like Demis Hassabis is a good person, but he's stuck in a vicious race for AGI. Yeah. And because of that race dynamic, he may believe in safety. But he can't do much about it, because if he makes his own lab respect all kinds of restraints and then, Sam Altman doesn't, it's not making the world any better. And you saw this very clearly with that fight between Anthropic and the Pentagon just about a month ago, where Anthropic said to the Pentagon, we don't want you to use Claude to either do mass surveillance of American citizens or conduct, control autonomous lethal weapons. And so Dari Amadei, the head of Anthropic, was trying to make a principled stand, but what happened was that immediately Sam Altman showed up and said to the Pentagon, whatever you want to do with my tech is fine, and I'll give it to you. And, you don't need to listen to this sort of do-gooder over there at Anthropic. So the race dynamic makes it impossible for individual lab leaders to govern AI. All they can do is try to build useful tech, and particularly I think with DeepMind and Demis Hassabis, what he's done and what he's rightly proud of is do AI for biology. And that's what won him the Nobel Prize. He's created the system AlphaFold, which is going to make it much faster to build new medicines. And I think, hopefully this AI debate right now, if you poll Americans, 2 out of 3 say that they find AI to be threatening, not an opportunity. If Demis can turn this around by delivering drugs that save people's lives in the next few years, maybe we have a shot at having society accept AI.
Yeah. So on that, then, do you feel that the narrative behind AI is for the most part quite negative now, and you're optimistic in the future that it will change? Do you think?
Yeah, I think one thing that needs to change in order for AI to be accepted into the world is, we need a different team in Washington, frankly. I mean, the Trump administration is just completely not interested in any sort of AI governance, and indeed just wants to accelerate crazily. And as long as that's happening, it's impossible to imagine AI being safe, and therefore it's very hard to see society accepting it. I went to China for 8 days in March because my book was rolled out there first. Chinese are always faster at everything. And what surprised me in China was that they are actually talking about safety. Both the scientists at the top AI labs and also the CEOs of tech firms are talking about safety. So it's possible to engage China in some sort of nuclear non-proliferation treaty where I think you'd have to control open source. You wouldn't want very powerful AI to fall into the hands of bad actors who might use it for massive cyber attacks or bioweapons. And so I think, right now it's very scary because we don't have political leadership in Washington, D.C. We don't yet have those medicines that may come out of the Demis Hassabis pipeline. What we do have is simply characters like Sam Altman, who are pretty unscrupulous. But I think, the story of Demis Hassabis shows that you can have an AI leader who is good. And so, maybe humanity will unite around the good people and we'll get to a better place in a few years.
Yeah, that's sort of joined on to that. People can decide whether this is good or bad. I think that most people would maybe agree that it would be bad, but there's a point in the book in which Musk is speaking with Larry Page, and this comment in particular was sort of went pretty viral back in the day when it came out. But the word speciest is used, and it was the first time. It was the first time that I've ever heard the word before. Is that something that people should be thinking about, in the sense, be prepared for, in a way where there are maybe individuals who are interested in the technology, have the power to push it forward and the capital and the influence, who are maybe not concerned with the human race, but more concerned with just driving technology forward. If that means that it surpasses the human race, then this is the natural thing that was meant to happen. Is that maybe somewhat worrying?
Yeah, it is. I mean, that is what Larry Page seems to believe, that, what we should care about in evolution is the survival of intelligence, and it happens to be a silicon intelligence, not a biological one. Larry Page is cool with that. And hard to know with Larry Page. Is such a weird dude that, sometimes you can't tell if he's, saying something to be provocative but I think he just kind of follows he's very smart, so he follows the logic of his ideas in a kind of almost sort of pathological, cold way. And he doesn't seem to worry that flesh and blood intelligence might be surpassed and even eliminated. And I think that's what drove Elon Musk, crazy when he heard it, and it prompted a falling out between Elon Musk and Larry Page. But the people who build these systems, particularly those who came on board very, very early when AI seemed to be almost impossible to imagine working, they're all unusual in some way. Demis is unusual too. Grew up kind of as an autodidact, teaching himself everything, total chess genius, coding genius, gets into Cambridge at 16, turns down more than $1 million in today's money because when he's 18, because he wants to go and study at Cambridge, not do more coding. I mean, super, super self-driven and unusual, but, fortunately, somehow good. Others are very, very unusual and not necessarily good. And so it is a bit of a scary equation.
Such an interesting part of it. There was something specific. I mean, this is kind of just completely context switching, that I didn't know about, and this has done the rounds a little bit recently. But the secret hedge fund at DeepMind was a surprise to me. How far did it's mentioned in the book briefly, but how far did your conversations with Demis span about this? I'd love to learn more about that particular part.
Well, this is something that Demis, never told me, but others around him told me. And then when I told him I knew this, he kind of, acknowledged it, but he was not very keen to elaborate. But I think, what's clear to me, because I actually felt this personally, when I first met Demis, it was at tech conferences in Europe. He would show up and give a talk, and sometimes I'd have a chance to say hi to him. And the way I tried to get on his radar is that I had written More Money Than God. And I do know people at Renaissance Technologies and other quant funds, including, one person who was the first PhD student of Geoffrey Hinton, the father of deep learning. And this person went from very early AI in the 1980s to Renaissance Technologies, built the first successful quant fund. And I knew Demis would know that, because everybody in the AI world knows who Jeff Hinton's students are. And so I mentioned my friend to Demis, and he seemed very intrigued to hear more about this guy from Renaissance Technologies. And so I knew, I could just see his eyes lighting up. So I figured he was curious about quant trading. And then later on, other people at DeepMind told me about this secret effort they had to build a trading operation.
That's great.
That's so funny. We're nearing the end, but I'd love to ask one sort of broader question, more around the relationship with Google. In the book, it starts off incredibly well. It's the obvious choice. There's capital there. It can fuel the science behind everything. And we know Demis isn't driven by financial incentives. But, it then comes across this sort of rocky position somewhere mid through. Like, could you maybe walk through what the marriage with Google looked like, and I guess the lifespan of that?
Yeah, well, as you say, although some people in London say it's terrible that the British company DeepMind sold out to an American parent too early, blah, 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 blah. I mean, that's really all nonsense in my view. I mean, you needed to get a backer who was going to pour in almost $1 billion a year for like a decade at least before you were going to get a product. And, I view Google's investment in DeepMind as a British triumph, because it attracted American capital into British R&D, a lot of capital. So, that's how Demis saw it too. He was very happy to have Google as a parent. It was basically a good relationship. But then, that safety and ethics commission I was talking about with Elon Musk involved failed, because Elon basically, used it to be a camel inside the tent. And then Google said, the heck with these oversight boards, we really don't want more people coming in and discovering our plans. And they closed it down. And Demis cared enough about the safety aspect that he engaged in with this 3-year secret fight, a project called Project Mario internally. And they and Demis and his co-founder Mustafa Suleyman tried to force Google to do a new independent safety board. And they also raised an offer of $1 billion from Reid Hoffman, the LinkedIn founder, to finance a DeepMind spin-out. So they had a credible threat to Google. Look, if you don't give us our safety board, we might just quit. So this was a fight that went on for 3 years. It became quite bitter. In the end, partly because of this, I think, Mustafa Suleyman used up all his political capital within DeepMind and got pushed out by Demis. There was more to that story than just this strand, but this was one of the strands. And so that was kind of a low point, I'd say, in the relationship between Google and DeepMind, circa 2018, 2019, when they're fighting over safety. But then in the last period, it goes right again. And in particular, after ChatGPT dropped in November 2022, Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Alphabet and Google, says, right, we need to merge Google Brain and Mountain View with DeepMind, and we're going to put Demis Hassabis in charge of both. Yeah. And then you kind of enter a golden age, because Demis essentially becomes more integrated into Google. He runs the entire AI engine on which Google's future really depends. He's very grateful to Sundar, because Sundar manages the high politics of Google and gives him the resources to do his AI research. And Sundar's grateful to Demis, because Demis is a genius at that research. And so I think it's the most important buddy act in all of global business right now, the Pichai Hassabis double act.
Yeah, that's fascinating. We're coming towards the end. I think there is one question that's, I guess, more of a fun one. It seems to be that Demis's favorite time is 2 a.m. Like he has a tweet out, I think a few weeks ago.
A week or so ago, yeah.
Yeah, around how, that's his favorite time. Why do you think 2 a.m. is Demis's favorite time?
Well, he would often tell me, we'd meet in this pub in North London near his home, and there was a dusty staircase at the back of the pub. We go upstairs, spend 2 hours talking to each other. And so, we did this a lot, right? So I heard him many, many times say to me, look, it's too noisy at the moment, Sebastian. There's this race, this AI race, particularly in Silicon Valley, it's nuts. You just can't think. You need time to think. And a lot of his, persona is this split between, on the one hand, a desire to be very competitive, win a capitalist competition, deliver, the best chatbot. He's all in on that. But he's also all in on science and thinking, and he does have a Nobel Prize, right? Yeah. So it's a remarkable combination of two different things. And at 2 a.m. is when he's not being bothered by all his duties and distractions as a chief executive, and he can think about science. And that's why it's his favorite time of day. It's also, the time of day when, as he told me a couple of times, he gets seized by the sort of spiritual sensation of doing scientific research. That if, his idea is that as you do science, you understand nature better, and that nature is created in a way that suggests some sort of intelligent divinity may have been behind it. So it's sort of his version of God is doing this scientific thinking at 2 o'clock in the morning.
So awesome.
I think what's most interesting is that you guys spent time, in a pub. That's where you guys met. I think that's the most interesting
just
thing.
Hanging out in the pub.
Yeah. Sebastian, thank you so much for the time. We really enjoyed it, and we really appreciate your time.